Hey everyone, it's Allie here. Nice to meet you and welcome to my channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Today I'm going to be discussing the serial killer who is best known in Glasgow, Scotland, and he is known as Bible John. And let's just get right into it. On February 23rd, 1968, a nude body was found. Now, at first when this man stumbled on this body, it looked like a mannequin, and as soon as he got closer, he noticed that it was indeed a body. This man then called authorities, and for some reason he thought that this was the body of a male, and because of this the police did not really act as quickly as they should have. Now, in the city of Glasgow in this time, there was a big homeless population, and so when this man called in to report this, the authorities just basically thought that it was a homeless man who had died from hypothermia, and so unfortunately they were not quick to act, which makes me so sad for so many different reasons. When the police finally came on scene, they realized that this was not the body of a homeless man. This was a body of a female. The body bore evidence of blunt force trauma to the face and head, and she had been strangled to death with her own stocking. An autopsy was performed, and the body was then found to be that a 25-year-old nurse named Patricia Docker. Patricia was a married woman with one child, and she had informed her parents that night that she wanted to kind of go and enjoy a night out and that she would be going dancing at a local ballroom called the Barrowland Ballroom. And the Barrowland Ballroom every Thursday and Saturday night had what was called over 25 night. So basically everyone there was over the age of 25. During the autopsy that was performed, it was noted that Patricia's cause of death was due to asphyxiation and that she had died shortly after leaving the ballroom that night. Unfortunately, at this point, there are no known witnesses and there's really no known evidence. There was somebody who did come forward saying that they heard a woman yelling at the early morning, like middle of the night, around 2 to 3 a.m. saying, "Stop, leave me alone." Like I said, police now are starting their investigation and they pretty much have little to nothing to go off of at this point. They began interviewing people from the Barrowland Ballroom, and guests who had seen Patricia noted that they did see her that night and that she had been dancing with a few different guys, but nothing really seemed out of the ordinary. I feel like what's kind of hard about this is that the majority of people who are here are there to, meet people, dance with different guys, dance with different girls. So I feel like it's really hard for anybody who may have been there and seen anything, to have really noticed anything out of the ordinary. Unfortunately, nothing really became of anything from Patricia's case for over a year. Now, about a year and a half later, in August 16th of 1969, 32-year-old mother of three, Jemima McDonald, was also looking for a night off. Now, she was a single mom. She often liked to go to the Barrowland Ballroom to kind of get a night off, take a break from the kids, and her sister, Margaret, often would babysit for her. Jemima had been seen by several people in the company of this well-dressed, well-spoken man who looked to be about 30 years old with kind of like a reddish blonde hair. He looked to have, a slim build. He looked to be in shape, and just an overall pretty good-looking, well-spoken man. Now, something very interesting about some of these people who were interviewed at the club was that those who had conversations with this guy said that he would reference the Bible a lot and like the Old Testament, and he was kind of quoting the Bible, and many thought maybe he was some sort of pastor or something. And this is kind of the first time we're getting a hint at why this man is eventually called Bible John. Jemima was seen leaving the club shortly after midnight with this man and was last seen walking towards Main Street or Landressy Street, which was towards the direction of her home. The following day, Jemima did not return home, and her sister, who was babysitting her kids that night, was starting to get a little bit concerned. This was kind of out of the ordinary for Jemima. Like I said, Margaret did babysit often for her, and it just wasn't like her to not return home at a decent hour. Later that day, Margaret started hearing some rumors around the town that a body had been found by like a group of school children in this nearby kind of creepy abandoned building. And while at first Margaret didn't really think much of it, she still hadn't heard from Jemima and she started getting really worried. So this is when Margaret decides to go over to the building herself, and this is where Margaret stumbles across the body of her sister Jemima. At this time, an autopsy was performed and it was confirmed that Jemima had died from asphyxiation from, again, her stalking, and she had also had a lot of blunt force trauma to her head and face. So this is very similar to the case that we see with Patricia about 1.5 years earlier. However, it took police over 10 weeks before they made the connection that these two cases could possibly be linked. The police had started interviewing people who were at the Barrowland Ballroom that night, and this is when the first composite sketch of Bible John is created. Now, I'm going to get into this a little bit later in the video, but I want you to pay close attention to this composite sketch. There had been talks that this man was redhead. There were talks that he had dirty brown hair that was like kind of reddish. There were talks that his hair was red with blonde highlights, kind of like a sandy blonde redhead. So at this point, over a month has gone by and there's just really little to no leads that the police have at this time. They have interviewed people, they had, this composite sketch, they were looking for suspects, and they just didn't really have a good trail. Over a month goes by, and on October 31st, the third body was then found by a man who was walking his dog. This body was found in the exact same state as the other two, with the exact same cause of death. This body was identified to be 29-year-old Helen Povick. The evening prior to her murder, Helen and her sister Jean, once again, you guys, decided they wanted a night out, and they decided to go dancing at the, guess where? The Barrowland Ballroom. This is where a little bit of confusion starts to take place because both girls had met men and they both were named John. One man, the one that Jean had been dancing with, said that he worked as a slater and was from the city of Castle Milk, while the other John, the one that Helen was dancing with, didn't really give information about what he did for a living or where he lived. After being in the company of these men for over an hour at the ballroom, the four decided that they would catch a cab home for the night. Jean's date decided to hop off at George Square where he could catch a bus to his hometown and he could be off for the night. So at this point it is now Jean, Helen, and John, the man Helen was dancing with, in this taxi. During this taxi ride is when we start getting the most information of building out this man's profile. The taxi makes his way to Jean's home. This is where Jean exits the taxi, and now it is just Helen and John in the taxi heading back to Helen's home, as her home was in the next stop. Later on, as Jean was kind of telling the detectives about this taxi ride, like I said, this is where she's able to give more information regarding this John than detectives have at this point in the case. Jean informs the detective that this man was extremely handsome, he was very well dressed, he was very well spoken, and that he, again, would quote the Bible a lot, and specifically Moses, the book of Moses, that a thing? I'm not really sure. And he also specifically talked about women who were adulterers, and I don't want to say that this specific ballroom had like a name for adultery, but it kind of did. At some point there were a lot of people who were in relationships, who were married, that would go out to this ballroom, and sometimes they would leave with other people. I don't know. This is something that this John guy mentioned in this taxi ride, was that, women who complete adultery are like the biggest sinners. I know that this ballroom is just full of married women looking to take home a new man, basically. Neither Helen or her sister were married, and so they were just kind of like, cool, okay. Kind of thought it was bizarre. They thought he was maybe some kind of minister or something like that, but he never actually mentioned his religion or any type of church that he was involved with. And from what Jean could gather, he introduced himself as, she said, maybe John Templeton or John Sempleton, something around that name. The last possible sighting of the suspect was last seen by the taxi driver, who saw a man fitting Jean's description at approximately 2 a.m. on October 31st, and he was walking down the street, and he said he was in a notably disheveled state, and it looked like he had some kind of blood on his face, or like some maybe kind of gash on his cheek, and it also looked like he was very dirty and just very disheveled. At this time, Jean is working with a police sketch artist to create a very detailed and distinct sketch of this John man, right? This is where I wanted you guys to remember that last sketch, because this new one is extremely detailed. It almost looks like a photograph. And to me, like, do I think there are similarities between the two sketches? Yes. However, they could be different people. I mean, they kind of just look like two average men, and I don't necessarily think the sketches look that close to each other. There was even some criticism that the sketch was too detailed, and that, you know, this artist was only doing her job by creating this painting and this sketch based off of the description that Jean gave to her. But now these people were not just looking for somebody who looked similar, they were looking for this exact painting of this man, and rather than here's a composite sketch of what we think this man looks like. So I'm curious, what do you guys think about that? Like, let me know in the comments if you think the detailed sketch that Jean kind of helped create, do you think that would possibly hinder the identification of this man, or do you think it would help? I want to know like what your opinion is, because I could definitely see both sides, so let me know what you guys think in the comments. At this point, there were over 100 detectives working on this case. They had 50,000 witness statements and over 5,000 suspects. Fearing that this man was still out there, there were 16 investigators who were assigned to basically go to these ballrooms around Glasgow and I guess kind of be undercover and pretend to be patrons there, just really focus on trying to find this man before he strikes again at one of these. So despite the extensive manhunt that was taking place, any evidence and anything that the police got was unfortunately leading to nothing. They had little to nothing to go off of, you guys. At this time, there were talks of an individual named Peter Tobin, and he had just been sentenced to life in prison for the murder of 3 women in the Glasgow area, kind of during the same time period. The reason I want to mention Tobin is because he often used false names to identify himself, and one of these names that were on record that he had used was John Sempleton, which is the exact name that Jean thought that she heard when John had introduced himself. Now remember, she couldn't tell if he said Sempleton, but that was one of the names given. There were also women who were coming forward saying that this man, Peter Tobin, had confronted them at the Barrowland Ballroom and had, you know, made a lot of advances toward them, tried to get them to go home, was extremely pushy. One woman even came forward and said that he actually committed sexual assault against her outside of the Barrowland Ballroom in this same time period. When this woman viewed photographs of Tobin at this time, she said it was no doubt in her mind that this was the Bible John that they were looking for. Now here's where things get a little tricky, is that this Peter Tobin man didn't really look anything like the sketch that was created by Jean and this artist. He didn't have red hair, he wasn't super tall, he just didn't really look like this super detailed sketch at all, really. However, there are a lot of people who think that he did look a lot similar to that first composite sketch, and this is kind of where the confusion sets in with these two sketches, because yeah, do they look similar? Yes. However, you know, with this other sketch being so detailed, it pretty much rules out anybody who doesn't look exactly like what this artist had created based off of Jean's description. It's also worth noting that I have read that some people believe there could possibly be 2 murders. So the fact that a murder had taken place back in February of 1968, and then it wasn't until a year and a half later that another murder with, you know, similar MO had taken place, and then not even 2 months later was another occurrence. So the timeline doesn't really add up as much. I mean, there are stranger things that have happened, but there are some people who believe that the second 2 murders that took place were actually just a copycat of Patricia's murder in February of 1968. So is it possible that Peter Tobin could be, you know, have something to do with these murders? Peter is in prison serving a life sentence for a murder of these other 3 women, and when he was confronted about these women from the Barrowland Ballroom, he didn't really say anything. He also, though, is known to like be very uncompliant. He doesn't want to talk to any police officers. He just is very short, doesn't really want to say anything, so it's kind of inconclusive whether or not, you know, he would admit to being involved or not. Now, there were so many suspects, like I said, and they were all lined up, and Jean was there as a witness and trying to pick people out of these lineups, and she just didn't think that she saw, you know, the man who did this. But she also says that no, there's no way it was Peter Tobin. I know it wasn't him. However, there were also notes that, you know, the 4 individuals that night had been drinking a lot. And so a lot of people are wondering if Jean's credibility, you know, is even that valid. And at this point, you guys, Jean has the most evidence and the best chance. She sat in a vehicle with this guy. She saw him, you know, face first, inches away from her in the backseat of a cab. So it's hard because at one point she's kind of the only person that, like I said, are able to build a profile off of. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about some of the DNA testing that was done, but in 2006, I believe Tobin's DNA was looked at some DNA that was found on Helen's body, and because it had been so long and because the DNA that was found on Helen's body wasn't kept very well, the DNA results came back inconclusive. There's a lot more information on that if you guys want. I will leave everything that I've listened to and researched in the description below. These murders stopped, but it's just so interesting that the police really didn't have that much to go off of. They didn't really have that much evidence, and that these murders just stopped. I also find Peter Tobin's involvement extremely interesting as well. Obviously, these cases have gone cold, which makes me so sad, which is so devastating that it has been, you know, this many years and there's still no justice for these girls and their families and their loved ones. I think that's it for this video, you guys. I listened to an amazing crime junkie podcast. Georgia Marie here on YouTube has a great video as well, and I will link all of those down below. All right, you guys, that is it for me. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Don't forget to subscribe on your way out, and I'll see you in my next video.